Greetings, this is Eugene the Philosopher, the greatest living philosopher after the unfortunate passing of Quentin Robert de Nameland, who has been the greatest living philosopher before me. Now here I wish to talk to you about what I would call the remnant religiousness, which is a topic I've promised to talk about in one of my previous videos. In particular, I think it was the Boring World video, which you might watch on my channel. Although I wish to confess to you that this video wasn't really that much thoroughly developed as I would like to, but still I wish to talk about this topic. So it would be kind of chaotic. It would be kind of a list rather than some logical sequence. So it's kind of, you know, this Roger Waters from Pink Floyd lyrics, where, well, it's kind of known among fans that he likes to make those lists, like in the song Eclipse from the Dark Side of the Moon album, where he says like, all that you touch and all that you see and all that blah blah blah. So, you know, that kind of list. So yeah. So it's gonna be kind of like that in this video. So, but firstly, I wish to ask a question: what is religiosity or religiousness? I really don't know what's the proper word in English for that phenomenon. I guess I would use them interchangeably, I guess. So, what is religiosity or religious feelings? So, I would say that, well, strictly speaking, like, relegare in Latin means like reconnecting, like, again, legare means connection, like legato in music, like connecting to notes, or league, you might say, where people are connected or other entities, not people, are connected, etc. So it's reconnection, almost like magnetic reconnection, right? Religion, I mean, and it's sort of like reconnecting you to the divine, from which you were disconnected for some reasons. And again, all the religions have various explanations of this disconnect. And again, see my video about repentive thinking, where I explore this topic, like how we were disconnected, so to speak, from religion. And I mean, in cultural terms, how we perceive that, how we almost like imagine that disconnect, I guess. Anyway, so reconnection to the divine or to other people, I would say. So it's any sort of those extra personal feelings. So it's either empathy to other people or some sort of feeling of something bigger than we are, right? That's what religion is, essentially. And again, since, as I've said in my video about, I think it was Boring World video, that religion is no longer fashionable, like really our current culture is more or less dominated by science, since, again, the age of modernity, like roughly speaking, 17th to 20th century. So it was all about science. So now, as Nietzsche said, God is dead, so religion is not a thing anymore. So, but we still need to channel those feelings of connection to something bigger than we are, or other person at least. So those are two main aspects of religion, I would say, that, well, yeah, those are really the mainstays of religion anyways. So we still need to channel those feelings somewhere, right? Even though science doesn't really allow us to do any of that. It's really like diminishing in all kinds of senses. But anyway, so we need to, so that's where what I would call remnant religiousness or remnant religiosity comes from, is from the understanding, perhaps subconscious understanding, that we need something to channel those feelings into, and yet not having this thing that we need to channel those feelings into at hand because of science, because science kind of thrown it all out, right? So yeah, that's what I call remnant religiousness. So we invent all kinds of stuff to put these feelings into. This is what I'm talking about. And one of the most, and here comes the list, so to speak. So the list of examples. So one of the most dominant examples, I would say, in modern culture is the national state and the government, because, well, they appear roughly in 19th century. Again, national states after the collapse of monarchies, etc. Well, maybe not completely. I mean, some monarchies still exist, even in national states, but still, the point still holds, I believe. And so national states are created in 19th and 20th century, and that was roughly the era when science really kicked in, like Industrial Revolution kicked in, and the God was killed, roughly speaking, in Nietzschean terms, in the world, like truly, in the full extent of this thing. And I wish to, I guess, reference my own discussion with Smash-O-Mash blogger on YouTube. I'll give a link in the description where we talk about socialism, I think, was the main topic, but we talked about nationalism quite a bit and how national states appeared, etc., etc. And I apologize in advance for her poor quality of the audio. It was his production, in my defense. So yeah, whatever. So I'll put the link in the description. It's a much more broader discussion of the topic, how national states became, let's say. At least I make quite a few remarks on this part, but it's not a topic of this video anyway. So the creation of national states produced statism, and this, Leviathan of Thomas Hobbes, where basically what Hobbes said is that we need this Leviathan, this huge monster of a government that would bring prosperity and peace, right? So this huge tyranny of the government that would suppress all the negative, aggressive elements in the society and would allow us to live peacefully together. So that was the thought in the middle of the 17th century, like 1640s-1660s, roughly, in Europe at least. And Bruno Latour, for example, brings this example, forgive this tautology, of Thomas Hobbes and Robert Boyle as creators of modernity. Like Thomas Hobbes produced the society with his idea of a, how do you say it in English, damn, like social contract, I guess. And Robert Boyle produced nature with his ideas of, well, natural philosophy, etc., etc. And this was the time of Newton, and this was the time of John Locke, by the way, who basically single-handedly created liberalism in the good sense of the word, not in the modern American sense of the word. And what is that also peculiar is that this was also the time of maunder minimum. So if you were into this sort of psychic kind of thing, that the sun really controls the mood of the people on the earth, there was actually kind of, damn, that it's so many digressions, but there was a study that shown that Twitter happiness index, you might Google that, correlates with the solar activity negatively. So the more solar activity there is, the lower is the Twitter happiness index. But that's a separate issue anyway. So in second half of the 17th century, so that's 1650s and afterwards, it was the time of the maunder minimum, and it was the time of the beginning of modernity, which is really peculiar in my opinion. So John Locke, Thomas Hobbes, Robert Boyle, Newton, etc., Isaac Newton, all of them kind of prospered in this period. But anyway, my point was that statism appeared after the monarchies pretty much crumbled. So this the idea was, roughly speaking, that through the government, so okay, let me go back. Well, I told you it would be a bit chaotic and unprepared. So in monarchies, we've had kings and emperors as basically almost children of God, right? So there was a divine sanction to their power. But when we've had the modernity and people said, well, maybe, again, Locke came and said people are equal. Well, he basically used the idea from the Bible. So he said that there should be no power of one human being over other human being, which is kind of an anarchistic idea. So we came to this idea that there is no divine power in kings or monarchs of any other sort. So we need some other channel of justifying of power of some human beings over other human beings, and government became this sink of this religious feeling of something divine that controls us, right? So since roughly 19th century, I believe, this is my statement, that government became this sink of religious feelings. So now we attribute to the government and the government officials, even to this day, by the way, that they are carriers of some sort of divine spark, let's say. So if the government says so, it must be true. Like it's divine, you know, there's some deep ontological truth to it. So this is what I mean when I'm saying that the governments really took over this power structure related to religion. So it's our remnant religiousness today that we consider governments having, let's say, more power than they really do, or rather we attribute to them this divine power ourselves. So this is what I'm talking about essentially. And there was another idea connected to that, that Christianity, let's say, promised to us heaven after death, but governments now, during and slightly after modernity, promises us heaven on earth, ultimately. Like they're saying, oh, we can make your lives super cool, like you're gonna have all kinds of wealth and all kinds of riches, etc. This is where we're moving today, right now. Like, more or less, this is the promise of the governments, of people in power. They're saying, well, life is gonna get better, right? Like the economy is gonna grow, etc. And it's also a religious idea fundamentally. Like, there was some other thing I wanted to mention, but anyway, I wanted to talk about socialists. So, social democracy, really, it's actually the idea of Russian philosopher Dmitry Galkovsky, modern philosopher, like he's like maybe 60 years old right now. So he says that, and I completely agree, that social democracy, which appeared in the middle of the 19th century roughly, is really a church. So it's really a religion. And again, Freemasons is mostly into social democracy, so they're kind of almost the same thing. And obviously, communist groups are into that sort of thing. So there was, again, that's another stupid digression, but Karl Marx himself, he was quite a high-grade Freemason. And there was an anecdote when he was in London and he was kind of trolling local, like, union leaders who were like super low-grade Freemasons. So Marx came to them in some bar or whatever, pub, and he asked them, like, oh, in which direction is reality developing, which is like grade 1 Freemason password. And they said, well, in a proper direction, which is an answer. And then he asked them, like, 32nd grade password, which is who hides in the statue's shadow. and they couldn't answer, so he trolled them because of that, and he kind of laughed at them, etc. But again, that's a separate story. So what socialism was about, essentially, is to bring heaven into earth, essentially. So promise heaven on earth, right? That's what communism is, fundamentally. So, and how would they propose to achieve that? Well, through government control, socialism, right? Socialism is the step towards communism. So full government control of everything would bring you to socialism, to heaven on earth. So again, trust in the government, supplemented, I guess, substituted, trust in God or God's children, which were monarchs, right? Kings and emperors, etc. So this is statism replaced as the sink for religious feelings, replaced monarchy as a sink of religious feelings. This is what I'm talking about. Hopefully it wasn't too long. But anyway, oh yeah, there was one other thing I wanted to mention, is that, well, I talked about Maunder minimum and all those new developments, like the emergence of modernity, like Peace of Westphalia, like probably the most important event in European history in the last 500 years, of 1648, I think. It also appeared right at the brink of the Maunder minimum, right? But there was also, speaking about heaven on earth, a poem of John Milton in 1660s called Paradise Lost. So it's also kind of fitting into this whole puzzle. But again, I'm not implying anything mystical here. I'm just noting that the second half of 17th century, there was really something going on, like something really important. That's, I guess, what I'm talking about. All right. So now governments replaced God. This is basically my point. All right. So let's go further down the list. So other things for religious feelings are, for example, romantic love. And here, again, I wish to remember my video about the Great Wall and abduction of Europa, where I talked about how our romantic love is predetermined by Middle Age art, fundamentally, and it's not so old as we might think. Like, our understanding of how a man should love a woman and a woman should love a man is really at best 500 years old, not more than that. So yeah. So romantic love might be another sink for those religious feelings of something more than you, feelings of reconnection, not magnetic, but reconnection with other person, obviously. I mean, through empathy, like you're dealing with something which is not you, so it's religious almost by definition because of that. And at the same time, this other person is a pantheon of various entities. Again, see my video Inland Empire, where I try to describe this model of a human being as a bunch of various networks and interests who kind of shift and trade and negotiate between themselves, etc. And you can appreciate this pantheon of other person and kind of almost, I don't know, pray to it, you know, like cherish it, etc. So other person becomes your God in some sense, and sometimes even in literal sense. I mean, some people almost like say, oh, you're a divine entity, etc. to their lover, I mean, etc. So it's completely understandable. So anyway, we're dealing with extra personal feelings here in romantic love. So yeah. Then other sink rather of those religious feelings would be conspirology. And again, see my video about two sources of conspiracy theories, like literally the previous video on this channel. So, and here I wish to just, since I've already examined conspiracy theories, I wish to just briefly mention that this external source, which I mentioned in previous video, here you can say, let's say, oh, these winners see previous video, are Satan's worshippers, let's say. So you kind of channel this religious hatred onto the winners, you know, whatever, Jews, Americans, British, Freemasons, whoever else you wish, cultural Marxists. So yeah, and plus whatever other mysticism you might connect to that. And here I wish to give a shout out to James SS, whoever it is, who commented under this video about conspiracy theories, and he said that devil might be the ultimate conspiracy theory. And I like this comment so much, like this idea that really, like, well, you have to watch my video to understand why I adore it so much. It's just so much in line with what I said there, but I haven't thought about this idea that really the idea of devil is a conspiracy theory in its own, and it's so cool. Like, this guy really nailed it. Like yeah, damn, that's so cool. I'm so jealous that I haven't thought about it myself. That, oh, damn. But anyway, so kudos to James SS. You can see his comment under my previous video. So another sink of religious feelings, this remnant religiousness, is, I guess, UFOs and aliens in general. And again, see my series in 3 videos about Onion of Aliens, where I explore the question of aliens, I mean. So here we have this, again, connection to something bigger, in the sense that, well, since aliens visit our planet, or we detect them through some mega structures, as this quasi-famous Tabby star, or how do you call it, like supposedly it's Dyson sphere around some stars. It's just ridiculous. But anyway, so it's the idea that aliens are much more advanced than us, so they perhaps visit us and observe us and maybe make experiments on us, etc. So it's this idea of something bigger than we are, right? So it's, again, a connection to something more powerful, more divine than we are. So it's this big brother, so to speak, that observes us. And it's this feeling that there is something out there, extra personal, extra corporal, extra human even, right? So the truth is out there, you know, this kind of thing. All right. There is something, let's say, behind the visible, behind the everyday life. Like, we don't see aliens here, but if you explore a little bit, you see aliens everywhere almost, right? On all these photos and all these crappy quality evidence, you know. There's this joke, like a meme on the internet, actually the English-speaking internet. So it's like, oh, look, there's a UFO, please bring our worst quality camera, you know, meaning that all the photos are super blurry. And there was a stand-up about Bigfoot also. That's a super long digression, but anyway. And the guy said, well, I think all the evidence shows that it's actually Bigfoot itself which is blurry, right? Something like that. Anyway, another sink of remnant religious feelings is exotism or exoticism. I'm not sure which is the proper word, if even there is such a word in English. So it's like looking for gods in other cultures, like proper gods. Like, our Christian God kind of sucks, so I'll go to Buddhists, or I'll go to Indians, or I'll go to whatever, and find better gods there, more true gods, right? Or something like that. So it's this tendency of seeking more true religiousness in other cultures. So you can think of yoga or whatever, all kinds of crap like that we can observe everywhere today. I mean, yoga not as a series of exercises, but as a spiritual practice, rather, in religious practice. That's what I wanted to say. So if it's just a series of exercises, with you as the main actor, that's one thing. But if you intend to connect to some divine, true Indian gods through that, that's a completely different thing. And this is what I'm talking about here. Then other sync of those religious feelings, I would say, would be cult of genius. And it actually appeared in modernity. So roughly speaking, late 17th century, like 70s, something like that. Geniuses appeared, right? So, and quotes of great people, things like that. So because, again, I would claim that greatness as we understand it today, and we're still kind of in the culture of modernity, so we're still kind of in that mindset as in late 17th century. So greatness is almost equal to authority, right? And what is authority? It's connection to the divine, because, well, we've all came out of this religious culture, and now we're in modernity, which denies religious culture. So what are we going to do with it? Well, we're going to channel our religious feelings into something else. Again, what I've already listed, plus geniuses, for example. So we're saying, oh, Newton was a genius, so he had a divine spark, something like that. So he is not one of us, he is one of them, whatever that means. So yeah, this is what I'm talking about. Then other sync, I'm going full Roger Waters here. Other sync is music, for example, which is inherently, like, music is some unhuman type of experience, right? So it's sort of mystical fundamentally on its own. And it's no wonder that music actually originated, like our current popular music actually is a very late fruit of religious music. Like, really, if you look at music of 16th century, even 17th century, it was basically religious music. Even Johann Bach or Friedrich Handel, German composers, since there was no Germany back then, of 17th century, they were mostly religious composers, right? So yeah, what I was talking about. Yeah, and if you look at the, let's say, concerts, like large music concerts, they're really almost like religious masses, or like ecstatic orgies, like, seriously. I don't mean anything bad with it. I'm just stating the fact, like it's a bunch of people, like, tuning to the same tune, so to speak, and kind of being in ecstasy together in the same rhythm and the same harmony, and kind of singing together. And it's usually quite an amazing thing, I would say. Yeah. And so it's a huge source of channeling your religious feelings into. That's what I'm saying. So it's also a piece of remnant religiousness, this kind of music. Actually, any kind of music, if you think about it. Because music kind of makes you think, it makes you reflect, it makes you remember stuff from your own life, and it makes you think it's more important than it probably is, really. So it kind of gives you this divine light, shines the divine light onto your life. So stuff looks more important than it probably is in your life, right? I mean, you think it's divinely important rather than only personally important. So you kind of connect to both the divine and all the human race, because probably other people experience the same things, because they probably also like this music, or at least this artist wrote this thing, so he understand, or she understand, or they understand what you felt back then because they described it so well, so blah blah blah. Well, really got it again, reconnecting to all these collectives and the divine and blah blah blah. Okay, so other sync of religious feelings, remnant religiousness, is, I believe, astrology and all other kinds of mysticism. So here I wish to give a general comment. And although astrology today in scientific terms, gets a second wind, I guess, a second breath. And I'll give a link to that again in the description. I have a presentation of my own where I talk about it. So maybe you'll be interested in this. But anyway, so this general statement I wanted to make is that it's the same idea that I mentioned in my videos about is our universe a computer simulation and boring world. So in both of those videos, I've already mentioned this idea that it's a fundamentally religious idea that order precedes chaos, like order creates chaos. You know, the God-produced world through logos, which is order, right? And the world is a bunch of chaos, mostly. So astrology and mysticism is about returning to the order, like seeing the order through chaos, like putting on your X-ray mystic goggles and seeing the order through the dirt of chaos, roughly speaking, right? So yeah. And here again, you have astrology, you have all kinds of mysticism, like there are spirits and they do all kinds of stuff, blah, blah, blah. So it's also remnant religiousness. It's fundamentally religion. And quantum mysticism, even people who use terminology and like some results, let's say, from quantum mechanics and interpreting them as signs of some supernatural activity or whatever, mystical activity, like again, Deepak Chopra, Eugene Wigner, and others. They're also definitely remnant examples of this remnant religiousness applied. All right, and quantum mechanics in general, like many interpretations, bear serious stamps of this remnant religiousness. And even you might claim relativity theory, at least some aspects of it also are kind of doubtful because of that. And because of the same shadow of the dead God hanged on a tree, if you know what I mean, behind Whirling in Rags Hotel. Well, certainly Big Bang comes from religion, like literally directly, like a Catholic priest, Georges Lemaitre, produced the idea of a Big Bang as an attempt to save the idea of creation of the world, standing on at least supposedly scientific ground. So yeah, Big Bang is really a creationism in disguise, and a lot of people recognize that, like literally maybe tens of millions of people, so it's not my idea at all. Anyway, one other big piece of this tendency of this remnant religiousness today is ecological movement. And I've talked about this already in my video about repentive thinking, or repentive thinking. You might look it up. It's one of the first videos on this channel. It's more than a year ago. So there's this Gaia hypothesis, like Gaia, by James Lovelock, the British thinker. He's kind of a scientist, chemist, I guess. But anyway, he came up with this idea that the planet is basically alive. It's basically kind of mutates and evolves, and it's all kind of a super complicated system. And I mean, he came up with this idea in 1960s, not surprisingly, I should add, because that was the time of hippies and New Age and all kinds of alternative religions. So this is one of the alternative religions, I believe, this cult of Gaia, and it brought forth the whole ecological movement, I believe. And recently it was really well illustrated with Avatar movie. James Cameron, I think, was the director, I'm not sure. But anyway, this Pandora planet is really the manifestation of this idea of Gaia, like the whole planet is alive, everything is interconnected, etc., etc. And obviously global warming ideas are out there. Again, see my video, Repentive Thinking. And I also talk about global warming in Stories of Medicine video, etc., etc. And even in Disco Elysium, that I've praised so much previously, especially in Inland Empire video and in some others, there's this strange area of the world called Pale, P-A-L-E, which is sort of like engulfing the world slowly. And it is said in the game, if you listen properly to proper people, they say that Pale actually appeared with humans. So it's sort of like anthropogenic effect, right? So it's also fed by this idea that Gaia is actually a god, the planet Earth or whatever else, Pandora, and we are destroying it. So we should repent, repentive thinking, see my video. So the same is with the Pale in Disco Elysium. All right, so let's come to the conclusion, hopefully. So what I was talking about in this video is that, well, just briefly talk about all the points I mentioned. So we have religious feelings naturally as human beings, right? And religious feelings means we need a connection to something more important than we are, which is the divine, roughly speaking, and we need connection to other people, which is empathy. But those both things are managed by religion. Mostly the first thing, the second thing kind of comes naturally as a consequence. And since today religion is not popular, it's basically dead. Well, I mean, some people are religious, but they're not really, if you think about it. Not seriously, at least. So we need to invent some other ways of channeling these religious feelings of connection to something bigger than we are and to some other people. And there are plenty of mechanisms developed over the course of centuries when we already were into this scientific culture rather than religious one. And so firstly it's faith in the state, then it's faith in state government, socialism, those kinds of things. Then we have romantic love. Then as an example I gave you conspirological theories, conspiracy theories, then UFOs or aliens, then exotic tendencies like searching for divine in other cultures on our planet, right? Like our Christian gods are bad, so let's look for other better gods on this planet in other cultures. Then the cult of genius, like great people as agents of the divine. Then music or other art. I should actually should have added again games, films, literature, etc. Then astrology, mysticism, then quantum mechanics and relativity, like all those weird theories. And again, see my video, Boring World, where I talk about it in quite a more detail. All the more queer theories, let's say, even more than quantum mechanics and relativity. Then ecological movement is another example. So, and there are plenty of other examples that I didn't mention here, but I hope you see the basic pattern here. Like, really, we need to channel those feelings somewhere, because human being cannot really exist without some higher purpose, let's call it that. So we need to invent something to live for, something to watch over us, or something that would watch over us, because, well, we are afraid, etc., etc. So all of those things, all of those questions need to be answered, and science cannot answer them. So people tend to put their attention into other areas, for example, those that I've listed previously. And one final comment probably is that I don't say that this is wrong. Again, quite the contrary. I'm saying it's natural, which means that, well, it's probably right. I mean, you have to do that. Otherwise you'll be dead, or severely depressed, like me, for example, and very anxious. So, yeah. So it was wrong only in the eyes of the culture of modernity, like science-centered, but now we're not in the culture of modernity anymore. So this religious worldview is only one of possible worldviews, and it's entirely viable. So this is what I'm saying. So I just try to explore cultural roots of various tendencies in our society, and my point was that ultimately they can be, well, probably not entirely, but at least partly reduced to this religiousness. So I call all of them remnant religiousness. If I forgot something, maybe I'll come up with some other examples. I'll mention them in the comments. Okay, thank you for watching. The eons are closing.